Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. Today we're going to be talking about sump pumps. We'd like to thank Maria Telma. She's been liking and sharing our podcast. So, wet and flooded basements were a problem till around the 30s when electricity became more popular in large towns.
What did they do before that?
Buckets. So recently, the U.S. Federal Clean Water Act made sump pumps a requirement in many areas. So sump pumps are much more common in new construction, even in areas that aren't necessarily high risk for flooding. So knowing how to replace a sump pump is really a nice skill to have. There's two main types of sump pumps. You have a pedestal.
Why is it called a sump pump?
A sump is somewhere low that collects water.
So it's not just because it rhymes?
But probably, plumbers.
Have you ever heard somebody use sump without
in a
pump?
sentence?
Yeah.
No. So you have a pedestal sump pump, which has the motor above the pit. So it has this large column that has the motor on top. It's air cooled, and then the impeller, that circular fan-like device that sucks in and pushes out the water that's in the pit.
Right.
And then you have submersible sump pumps that they're water and oil cooled. They're completely sealed, and they stay submerged under the water. So there's nothing exposed other than the discharge pipe.
Which, this is the most popular type?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people say that pedestals last longer. I haven't seen that to be true.
Right.
Most of them last 6 to 10 years, probably on average. What most people don't like about, and a lot of inspectors, that we've talked to over the years, what they don't like about pedestal-style sump pumps is that when they're running, they're just so obvious that they can attract kids' attentions.
Right.
So they want to go investigate, and then you can stand on the cover sometimes and, have the potential to fall into the pit. So I think a submersible is just a nice style. It's easy to install, and then you've got the top of that completely closed off.
Let's start with replacing a sump pump.
One of the biggest questions homeowners have is how big of a pump should I get?
And bigger is not always better.
Yeah, it's funny. I've talked to a couple manufacturers. If you get a sump pump that's too large and it drains the pit too quickly, it doesn't have a chance for it to go through its normal cycle.
Right.
And if the motor is too small, then it runs so long that it prematurely wears out. You're really looking at the vertical height and then the horizontal run of the discharge pipe and the height of it. So the vertical height is called your head height. And we had two companies that we used to do. When we first started working with customers, we would call Flowtech. It's Flotec or Wayne. And you can call either one of those companies and give them your dimensions, so your height and your horizontal run, and they'll tell you exactly what size sump pump. So that was always helpful. But what's funny...
And if you move into a house and, you're replacing a sump pump, you should still call. Just don't go by what's already there.
Yeah, absolutely. After doing this for years and talking to Flowtech especially, we did a lot of training with them, over 90% of the homes, a half horsepower sump pump is the best size. Which is pretty interesting. So if you're in a hurry or if you're in a flood and there's not a lot of choices at the hardware store, if you get a half horse sump pump, in most cases you're going to be okay. You should always change the check valve too when you're changing your pump.
What is a check valve? So
your check valve is a one-way valve. Usually it's on a rubber coupling that has hose clamps that lock the short length of the discharge pipe that's coming off of the pump to the whole rest of the line.
Right.
And what's nice about that is depending on how long and how high your discharge pipe is, it's not going to allow that water to all come back into the pit.
Right. Check valves can be PVC though, right?
Yeah, I really prefer the rubber boots though, because it makes an easy place to disconnect the old sump pump.
Yeah.
So you just take off the hose clamps, you pull it apart, you're able to lift that short pipe that's connected to the sump pump, just lift the pump right out of the pit.
Because PVC ones you have to glue in?
It depends on the style, but yeah, some you have to glue in place. So I really prefer the one with rubber sleeves.
Are we actually going to cover the steps in replacing a sump pump?
And this is a really nice project for homeowners. So if you have a bad sump pump, all you have to do is unplug the old pump And then you're going to take the cable, if that has cable ties or tape holding the electric cable to the discharge pipe, you want to disconnect that. We're going to disconnect the check valve. In most cases, we're going to have that rubber coupling with 2 hose clamps. To unscrew that, you're either going to need a nut driver or a slotted screwdriver. Once you loosen that up, you should be able to wiggle the discharge pipes and pull it out. Sometimes if it's very old and stiff, it's hard to do, so just take a razor knife and cut off one side of that rubber sleeve. So that's very easy. And then all you have to do is grab the old, depending on your cover, it may be slotted, so you can just slide that cover away, or if the cover has a hole in it, you're going to lift the whole thing up. But once you remove the check valve, you just grab the discharge pipe that's connected to the old sump pump, and you're just going to pull it right out of the pit. And now you're going to unscrew that discharge pipe connected to the old pump. Once you unscrew it, and you're going to need a large adjustable pliers or a pipe wrench. Once you remove that, you're going to check the male thread, because you're going to have a male fitting that is connected or glued to your PVC. You want to make sure that that's not worn or looks bad, because you may need to change that. And then you want to make sure that you measure, before you run to the hardware store, measure from the bottom of that sump pump to the top of that discharge pipe. And that height is going to have to match when you pick up your new pump, because some sump pumps might vary a little bit on the height where you screw in that pipe.
Right.
So you want that to match. And then if there's a difference, then you can have, at the hardware store, you can just buy a short length of PVC and a new male adapter. You're going to glue those together, and then you're going to create a new section of PVC pipe. When you get your new sump pump and bring it home, first thing you want to do before you drop it into the pit is check the pit. Most homes are going to have a liner, so there's going to be a plastic on the bottom of that, so you're not right up against regular earth.
Oh, really?
Yes, and some of the older homes, like some of the old houses that we remodeled, it's amazing. Some of these old pits where it's just dirt and sand, and so it's terrible. So you need to have some bricks or some flat stone, because you never want to set one of these sump pumps right on earth or sand. So get some bricks, if that's the case, or some flat stone. You want it up off the surface, but in most cases you're going to have a plastic or steel liner. You want to make sure you get in there and clean that out. And this is a really nice place to have a wet vac. And in fact, if you want to see a cool video on our Fix It Home Improvement channel on YouTube, we're going to be doing a video on this new workshop wet dry vac. And it's really unique, because not only is it a wet dry vac, but it has a leaf blower built in.
Fancy.
So that's pretty cool. So anyway, you're going to clean out your pit and make sure there's no debris in there. And then you're going to drop in your new sump pump, and you've screwed in your length of the discharge pipe. You're going to line this up, put on your check valve, and then you want to take the cord, and you want to either use a cable tie or a little electrical tape, and just make sure that that cord isn't going to drop in and have a chance to come in contact with the float and the switch. And then you're just going to plug it in. You're going to get a 5-gallon bucket of water, start filling it. You're going to fill up that pit and just make sure it's working properly.
Like fill it up how far?
Fill it up until the switch goes off. So it's going to raise a float, depending on whether you have a tethered switch or a vertical float switch. That float is going to lift until it triggers the switch, and it's going to turn on. Then you just want to make sure that it's flowing properly. You're going to run outside and make sure that it's discharging properly.
And you have to run?
Yes, it's an important part of the process. What I would also do is I would take a magic marker and I would mark the date on the discharge pipe coming out of the sump pit, and that way you know when you changed it. The U.S. Department of Housing Development estimates that 10 years is the average life of a sump pump from their studies.
Because you don't want to wait till your sump pump fails.
Yeah, terrible. I think this is just a nice routine. When your sump pump or ejector pump is around 10 years old, just go ahead and change it.
Nobody does this except my cousin actually did it.
Yeah, I did it.
Yeah?
Me and your cousin.
Yeah. Got a great video out of it. But, I mean, most people just wait till it fails before they...
Yeah, but these are great habits. Like a lot of the stuff we talk about. You know, it's just nice to have a routine.
Well, I mean, until you get a flooded basement and it's like, hey, this sucked.
Yeah. Another tip when you're going in the hardware store, you have the choice, and really look at the boxes, because you have sump pumps, you have effluent pumps, and sewage pumps. Sump pumps are what you're using to remove groundwater from a sump pit. So this is clear water that's been, that's coming in from groundwater into your house. Effluent pumps, this is if you have like
I've never heard this term.
So if you have like a split level house, you'll have a sump pit and the wastewater from bathtubs, sinks, your washing machine, this is going to go into this pit, and this has to be discharged into your main sewer line. And these effluent pumps are designed to take solids, usually up to half an inch, sometimes 3/4 of an inch. And then you have sewage pumps or ejector pumps, and these are designed to grind waste. So if you have a toilet going into a special pit, this is going to grind up solids up to 2 inches. And these are special. You have to have a special lid on this. It has to be sealed. There has to be a vent stack that goes out to your main, stack going out of the house.
Right. And these are all merchandised together.
Yeah, and sometimes they do a bad job.
Right.
So they're grouped together sometimes. When you're looking at your new sump pump, there's also 2 different types of switches. One is a vertical float switch, and this is considered one of the most reliable. This float rides up and down on a vertical rod, and this will go into the smallest sump pits up to the large ones. Then you have tethered float switches, which are attached to a cord. So they float up on this cord. They have to raise to a specific height to trigger a switch. And these can get hung up on the inside of the pit, and they also need a larger pit. In general, a vertical float switch is going to go from about 11 inches larger, and a tethered float switch needs about 14 inches or larger. And most of these are going to be about 2 feet deep, these pits. The best floats are going to be solid. So Zoller is, one of the most popular. Zoller. So in Chicago, most people say Zoller.
I've never heard Zoller.
Zoller's the way they actually
in my
pronounce
entire
it.
life.
Yeah, well, when I took some training from them, they kept calling themselves Zoller, and I thought I was at the wrong training. So it's Zoeller. Yeah, it's like, what are you guys talking about? Nobody calls it that around us. But they have some really, really highly rated sump pumps, and what's nice about their floats is that they're solid. Hollow floats can leak over time, and so they fill with water, and now your switch isn't going on.
Which you can replace the switch.
Yes, yeah, and there's kits. So if you have a sump pump that's just running nonstop and it just won't stop, so your switch went bad, but it's in the on position, just unplug it, and then you can buy one of these kits. You plug your plug into this little adapter, you plug it into the outlet, and then you have a new float that you tie to your discharge pipe.
Right.
So it's very easy to replace. So if you have a sump pump and it's a really nice sump pump, but just the switch went bad, you can get one of these kits at the hardware store. Another thing you're going to see on this packaging is the gallons per hour. So make sure that you're comparing on these charts the same head height. So we said the head height was the vertical height. And you'll see some, let's say that they're rated 4,400, but it'll be at 0 feet. So that's 0 height. And then some will say the same style and horsepower and everything will say 3,200 at 10 feet. So you really want to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. So you want to make sure that you're looking, and the industry standard, or most of the plumbers that I talk to, they're looking at a 10-foot head height to see the gallons per hour. So just so if you're looking and comparing, or if you're looking at reviews, a 10-foot head height is what most pros look at.
And 0 is bad.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're just pushing it. There's no resistance. I mean, it's kind of weird they even do that. Then also, a question we got a lot is the difference between cast iron and plastic. Most pros like cast iron because the cast iron around the impeller, so that little fan that sucks in the water and pushes it out, it keeps it in place, it's solid, it reduces the wear. Also, a cast housing around the motor itself is going to absorb heat and it's going to keep that motor cool, whereas a plastic housing can actually overheat. Like if you've got a big storm and your sump pump is running and running and running, you can actually overheat that molding around the motor and crack it and damage it.
Nice.
Because these are sealed. You don't want it to crack.
Right.
But what's funny is I took some training. I think it was from Wayne. I can't remember. It was years ago. And I was talking to them about the difference between cast iron and plastic. And they said that the internal parts of almost all sump pumps, there's no difference.
Right.
It's just the strength of the housing. So if you're in an area where you hardly ever use the sump, it's never called upon, and let's say, with some of these new regulations that they had to put one in.
Right.
And it's been years, so you want to replace it, you can just probably go with an inexpensive plastic body, and you're probably going to be fine. But if you're in an area where your sump pump works a lot, you'd probably want to go with cast iron.
And it's funny, when you pick up the box, the difference in the weight.
It's wild, man. Huge difference. One thing I didn't mention was when you're looking at the old pump or the old discharge pipe, when you're bringing it in to change it, make sure you look at it, because some of the old pipes used to, when we first started in hardware, they had sump pumps that were 1.25 inch discharge and 1.5 inch discharge. All of the new sump pumps, it's finally standardized now. So if you have a traditional sump pump, the discharge pipe is going to be 1.5 inch. If you have a sewage pump or an ejector pump, it's going to be 2 inches. But for your standard sump pump, it's going to be 1.5 inch. But if you had an old one with an 1.25 inch pipe, you're going to have to adapt that to the new 1.5 inch.
Haha. One thing you haven't mentioned is it should be a GFCI outlet.
Yes, in most cases you should always have a GFCI, unfinished basements, anywhere 6 feet within water. One of the controversies with the GFCIs and sump pumps is phantom tripping. So, it's a problem with a GFCI if there's any type of variance in the electricity coming in and leaving the plug,
right,
then that GFCI is going to trip that internal breaker, and now it's off. So let's say you've gone on vacation.
Which is really bad.
Bad on the sump pump. So let's say you're on vacation and the sump pump's running. For whatever reason, and a lot of times they just call them phantom tripping. If that line is connected to other things, now you have a sump pump that's not working. So a lot of the pros, they recommend, because this is the outlet that's usually in your crawl space or a basement,
right,
or it's tucked away, and you're not using this outlet for anything else.
Right.
So it's not like it's going to be a shock hazard if you're not using it to plug things in and out of. You plug this sump pump in once, and you're done. Most pros recommend just having a traditional outlet here, so that there's no chance that it goes out if you happen to be away from the home.
You want to talk about the discharge pipe?
So most people recommend it should be at least 10 feet away from the house that you're putting this water, and up to 20 feet. A couple of the insurance companies are recommending that 20 feet now is the new distance you should have from the house. You can do this easily with the flexible hoses.
Right.
And, it's just easy.
This is the ones that come in the bag?
Yes, yeah. And you're going to run into an occasion, too, instead of PVC coming out of your sump pump, you can just have this flexible hose also.
Right.
So just be aware of that. And then I would say where it leaves the house, make sure that you're using something to seal it up. If you have a really tight tolerance, silicone is really nice, because it's going to stand up to a wide variety of temperature and moisture and vibration.
When we replaced the sub pump at my cousin's house, there was that extra pipe coming out of the pit.
For radon mitigation.
Well, duh.
So you may run across this more now. They have a lot of these new systems where they take the sump pit, they seal the cover, and then they run this extra PVC pipe into this. As radon collects in that pit, they have a small fan that pulls it through the house and out and up through the vent out of the house. So you may run into that. That PVC is just going just inside the cover, so it's not connected to anything.
Right.
It's just kind of sucking the extra air out of there. Just be aware of that. It's no big deal. Radon is interesting. This is a radioactive element that's being released from soil and rock and water, and the EPA says it's the second leading cause now of lung cancer. Our houses are getting tighter and tighter, so you're going to see more and more of this radon mitigation, and they connect it, in many cases, to the sump pit.
What are some top-rated companies?
You have Wayne, Liberty, Flowtech, which is FLOTEC, Zoller, ZOELLER. And one pump that I really like, this has been rated very high, is the Easy Sump from Flowtech. And it's a half horse vertical float switch. So this is the most common.
Right.
And it goes into a 10-inch pit or wider. It has the discharge pipe, the check valve, all attached to the pump already.
Right.
So it's really cool. And this will adjust from the old 1.25 up to the standard 1.5 pipes. So depending on, it doesn't matter what you have. It's kind of goof-proof. What's cool is you just take this new pump out of the box. It's put together. It's pre-assembled. You measure from the bottom of it to the top of the check valve. You take that measurement and subtract 3/4 of an inch. You take that number. You drop your tape measure down into the pit. So now you've unplugged your old sump pump and you remove the cover. You drop a tape measure down into the pit and you make a mark on that measurement that you have. And now you just take a hacksaw, you cut through the pipe there, you pull out the old sump pump, you drop in this new one, and you connect it with the check valve. And that's all there is to it. Then you're going to tie up your cord, plug it in, and you're done. So just it's a few dollars more than just a pump without all the parts, but amazing, very, very simple if you want an easy way to install a sump pump.
One thing we haven't talked about yet are backup pumps.
So this is pretty cool. You actually have a second pump inside your pit, and if the electricity goes off, this is run off of either a marine or a deep cycle battery. Electricity's off, this takes over. So just fantastic.
Where is it located in the pit?
So a couple different ways it can be set up. One is off a Y fitting, and then it can be
off the discharge pipe?
It can be on a bracket hanging off the discharge pipe. It can be run off a T fitting just above the main pump. So it's sitting just above the main pump. So when water gets that high, then it'll discharge it. Or you can have, I've seen a couple where they're actually sitting right next to the main pump, and they'll have their own discharge pipe running along next to it, or you can cut it into the main.
Are they smaller?
Yes, yeah, much smaller. And so it's just
so it's
for...
like a baby
Yes,
pump?
It's a baby pump, and it's just for emergencies, so it doesn't have to be that huge. And then sometimes if you're in a high water table area, or if you have, a lot of occasions where you have, flooding, this will actually help the main pump work. So you can have them set up to where it can trigger itself on. So if your main pump just isn't handling the amount of water coming into the pit, this will actually help discharge it. And so those have their own discharge pipe connected to it. But they just do a great job. If you're on vacation and there's a storm and the electricity goes out, or even if you're home, on a late Saturday night or Sunday night and there's no stores open and you have a bad sump pump, this is just as a nice backup. There's a couple styles that are rated very high. The Basement Watchdog, this is a half horse. It's called the Big Combination Unit. So if you're changing your main sump pump, this is a unit that has your main sump pump and the backup all combined together. And it's completely assembled, so it's all joined together, and they use a Y to connect it to the main discharge pipe, and then it has an alarm and warning lights. It has dual floats to each sump pump.
Wow.
So just really interesting, nice backup on all this. So if you're looking for something where you feel like you're going to be protected, this really does a nice job. Another backup that was rated very high is the Wayne Smart Backup, and it's actually called the Wayne Smart Minder Advanced Notification Battery Backup Sump Pump System.
Wow.
So that's what you're looking for on the package. But this thing is constantly analyzing the charger and the battery, and if there's ever a problem, it'll actually call you.
It'll call you?
So it'll call up to 3 different numbers. Now this you have to have plugged into a landline.
Yeah, because otherwise how's it going to call you?
But one of the big problems with having a backup battery system is that these marine batteries, you have to replace them once every 3 to 5 years. So this will actually check it for you and send you a reminder with hey, it's time to change the battery. And one of the new technologies, you can get these AGM batteries, and it's for absorbed glass mat technology. This is a completely sealed battery, and these last 2 times longer than traditional marine batteries. You know who's credited as the inventor of the first battery?
No.
Alessandro Volta, and he had the voltaic pile. It was the first battery in 1799.
Did you have a hard time finding history about sub pumps today?
I really did.
Yeah. What sort of maintenance should you be doing with a sub pump?
So at least once a year, you should be removing the cover, filling that pit with water to test the pump. And then I would also check the discharge, make sure the water's flowing really well. If you have a pit that's earth or sand where you have your sump pump on bricks, I would check the screening, so the inlet where the water's coming in. I would probably disconnect it from the check valve, pull it out, and make sure I clean it and maybe hose it off. And then I would probably check the pit too at that point, use a wet vac and clean it if you need to. And then if you have a backup system, you want to check your charger, you want to check your monitor, and you want to replace that battery every 3 to 5 years. Put the date when I purchased the battery, put it somewhere there, also when I changed the pump the last time. And then whenever you're going on vacation, I would always check that pit and check the sump pump.
What about odor coming from the sub pit?
You can use 1 part bleach to 5 parts water and pour it into the pit. If it's connected to like a wash tub, you can just pour it into your wash tub, and that's going to kill bacteria that causes odor. You can use a microbial cleaner like Unique or Robic. We've talked about them before. They use natural microbes to eat up everything inside there. And then one thing that, I've had the question a few times from customers is when I'm draining my water heater, a couple of times a year just to keep it in shape, can I take a hose and just put that right in my sump pit? And so when we did training with a couple of these manufacturers, they say never put hot water into a sump pit. It is not designed to take hot water. You can in many of the plastic impellers you can destroy and the parts inside there. So you never want to drain your water heater into your sump pit.
Do you have anything else to add?
If you're picking up a sump pump, I would make sure I know the size of my pit and then the vertical height and horizontal run of your discharge pipe. You can look in the packaging. You can also call one of these manufacturers. They'll help you with the size. In general, 1/2 horsepower with a vertical float switch is going to handle more than 90% of the homes. And then just make sure that you're discharging this away from the house 10 to 20 feet. Think about a backup pump for peace of mind when you go on vacation or late at night, when there's a storm. I would always mark the date whenever I change the battery on a backup or if I change the sump pump. So, a battery, change it 3 to 5 years, sump pump 6 to 10 years. Then I would also check the pit at least once a year, fill it with water, and make sure that the pump is working properly.
Let's wrap this up.
You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or Jabbercast. You can download for iOS devices at fixit.jabbercast.com.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
You can subscribe there as well.
If you'd like to email us, you can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.